So the Joker sequel has been released this weekend, directed by Todd Phillips, Joaquin Phoenix returning in the titular role, and Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn or Lee Quinzel. The plot is set a few years after the events of the first film, where Arthur Fleck is facing justice for his crimes, while also meeting a new love interest in Lee Quinzel in the prison that he's spending time in, along with the ramifications of the movement that he inspired across Gotham City. I had a chance to see this movie the other night at a late night showing because I wasn't really sure if I was going to be able to squeeze any time due to my other plans that I had made this past weekend, but I had a chance to see it and I thought, alright, might as well give it a shot right now. And of course, having seen the first film, I felt like I owed it to you guys to give this one a watch. Walking out of it, I was pretty stumped by some of the choices that were made, similar to the first film, but I'm not really sure if I would qualify that as a positive or necessarily a negative. It's really hard for me to put into words how this movie made me feel. I certainly understand a lot of the criticisms that are being thrown at this, but if this is something that you like as far as how different it is from all the other entries in the comic book genre, you might actually get a kick out of this, but even then, if you like the first film, you may or may not care for this one. To refresh any of you guys' memories who've been following me for a while, but for anyone who's new to my channel, I thought the first film was good, although kind of overrated and I think massively overhyped, largely because of how people were praising how different it was compared to the other entries that we got at the genre at the time in 2019. Not to mention that in the same year we had Avengers Endgame, and I think a lot of people were just jumping at the chance to throw shade the MCU's way. If you doubt me, just check out Chris Stuckman's 2 videos that he did on the Joker at the time. That's the prime example of what I'm talking about. All that aside, even though I didn't really quite connect with the film on an emotional level, I think it had a lot going for it. And when they announced a sequel, I wasn't too shocked by it, although with the usual stuff, I was kind of wondering, why do we need a sequel for this? I think it was perfectly fine as a standalone movie, but if they had a good reason for making a sequel, I'm always up for checking it out. And to Todd Phillips' credit, this movie does go in a different direction instead of rehashing what we saw the first time around. Without being too specific on spoilers, I'm going to keep some of that to a minimum in case some of you guys haven't seen it. I was kind of wondering if they were going to do the same kind of twists and turns where you think it's playing out a certain way and then it turns out it was all inside Arthur's head and it didn't happen the way that we were told, by him at least. This movie doesn't really do that, although I think it's up for debate on whether or not it actually was mostly inside of his head, particularly with what he deals with Lee Quinzel, Lady Gaga's character. I'm just going to call her Harley Quinn for the sake of this review. This is mostly a court drama and how the Joker, Arthur Fleck, deals with how everybody worships him as some kind of a idol or saint. At least in their eyes, an anarchic saint. Even throwing a few musical numbers in here too. I don't really care for musicals that much, depending on which one it is, but it is a pretty bold swing, and I do appreciate the attempt, but I don't really think it stuck the landing for me personally. Maybe other people, if you're into musicals, you may or may not like it, but for myself, it kinda just felt like this could have been any other movie, not just the Joker sequel. I don't know if I'm really making any sense on that one. Like with the first film, there are a couple of Easter eggs that they sprinkle throughout this movie, although not quite as big as the first film did, where we had a young Bruce Wayne. In this one, it's not really so much a spoiler, I guess, if you have been seeing the trailers or anything. I don't know if they show him in the trailers. Harvey Dent is the prosecuting attorney against Arthur Fleck. We all know who he later becomes in the future. And there's a glimpse of Wayne Tower among the Gotham skyline. And I believe this movie is set during the late 70s, early 1980s. Part of me is kind of curious to see how Batman would be portrayed in this era. Very similar to the Michael Keaton Batman, or maybe similar to Christian Bale, Robert Pattinson, or maybe a blend of all three of those things. Gets a guy like me thinking about that stuff. As for Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn, when they first announced her as the character, I thought that is a genius idea. Because have you seen the way this woman dresses on stage? It almost feels like a perfect fit on paper. I don't have anything against Lady Gaga. I'm not really into her music. I also haven't seen A Star Is Born, the one iteration that she starred in with Bradley Cooper some time ago. But when she sang at the Oscars one year, a medley of songs for The Sound of Music, I was blown away. I thought, okay, this woman can definitely sing. Her music is not really my style, but she clearly has the talent and capability to do something great with it. I would say as far as her performance goes, she's actually quite good. As for her character, I'm not really sure if I was able to connect with her. Maybe to a certain degree I am. But there's certain reveals that are made in the film that kind of make me think that, is it a certain way? Is it not a certain way? The movie doesn't really address whether or not any of this is true. Again, I'm being light on the spoilers. I do kind of like there is some sort of aura of mystery where you're not really sure what's real and what's not. And given that we're viewing this from the perspective of Arthur Fleck, that doesn't really surprise me because it kind of honors the whole multiple choice aspect of the Joker's backstory where you're not really sure which is true and what's not. She is a pretty big thorn in his side though, even when they first go through their honeymoon phase at the start of their attraction, and then eventually things go a certain direction by the end of it. And just like with the first film, there's a few moments in here that left my jaw hanging just ever so slightly gradually as the scene went on. And they bring back that certain character who Arthur lets go when he kills his one friend, the little person. I think his name's Mr. Puddles or something. I don't remember exactly. He shows up in here to testify in the court. I guess minor spoiler in here for just a 1 second, and if you don't want to know, then just skip to this timestamp. I thought he was going to kill him right in the courtroom and later on in the movie, but he doesn't. Because he's actually one of the few decent people that show up in these two movies, so I'm really glad that they didn't kill him there. And certain things happen where Arthur has to come to terms with certain things, which I did really like that they had him acknowledge it, but then it leads us to the ending, which I won't give it away. It was pretty astounding to see what they did with it. And after soaking on it for about a couple of days and hearing other people's thoughts, like from New Rockstars and Screen Crush and a couple other YouTubers on here, I thought it was fitting because of what they had set up with him and how he is like an inspiration of the quote-unquote Joker movement in Gotham. I'm being really careful here. I kind of like the idea of it, but I'm not really sure if it was exactly the right move. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. It's certainly going to get a lot of people talking, and it's already starting to spark some discussion on here, and I don't really see it ending anytime soon anyway. Also, I think it's best to just leave the series at this one, because Todd Phillips has said that he's not going to do any more Joker sequels. This, I think, was his last-ditch effort to do something with it. And thinking about it with the court cases, I've heard other people say that this was him putting on trial the praise that the Joker movie had gotten in 2019, with how everybody was just showering praise over it left and right, at the point where they actually admired the Joker character and looked up to him as some kind of idol, and this movie basically showed him, no, this guy is not a hero, he's not a saint. Even the best comic book films, like The Dark Knight, will show you that their villains, like the Joker, have understandable motivations, but the way they want to solve those problems are not condonable. So I did like how Todd Phillips put some of those praisers in their place and saying, okay, let's be real here. This guy is not someone that you should worship as a hero. So I thought the movie was alright. It's not something that I would particularly recommend if you didn't like the first film. If you didn't like the previous film, you're probably not going to like this one. If you like the first movie, you may or may not feel the same way. But it's certainly worth checking out if you want to at least see where the story goes. And if you want something different from the comic book genre, well, this is the movie for you. From a tone and aesthetic perspective, it's very similar to the first film, feeling like something that Martin Scorsese would have made today if he was still in his prime. But I do like how it takes it in a different direction with the musical numbers and the certain story points and twists and turns that it takes. It could have been a little bit better, but I'm trying to be careful on the spoilers here. And one last thing, this article that I saw where it was talked about as being worse than Madam Web, I'm not really sure what movie you guys were watching. Madam Web is considerably worse than this, because Todd Phillips actually has built a rapport with Warner Brothers, and they trusted him to make the movie that he thought was the right idea. Whereas with Sony and Madam Web, they were more concerned about making a product, and they chose people who may have had some talent to them, but they weren't qualified for the job that they were given by Sony Pictures. Joker sequel has the right intentions, Madam Web doesn't. So that's all I got to say about the Joker sequel. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie if you've seen it, and as always, see you in the next one.